Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Graham Hudson, the EAA Secretary, and we're very pleased to welcome you to day 2 of the e-assessment question brought to you live by the e-assessment association. It's almost the end of our streaming. Tomorrow will be the last day, and we've had a real blast. We've had some great presentations, and we've got some even better ones in store for you today. So I hope that you enjoy your session. I'm going to hand you over now to our chair for today, Fiona Harvey, and she's going to take you through all that's happening and introduce you to the speakers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 3. Yes, as Graham said, I am Fiona Harvey. I'm the Director of Student Community at the University College of Estate Management, and I'm also an EAA board member. So this is Assessment in Higher Education. So we have 3 talks today. It's a broadcast session for the talks, so you'll be able to ask questions later on, but the scheme of things is that we'll play things first. So yes, so welcome to our the last one of this week, or the last one before the last one this week. So before we start, I think it's important to just mention the association itself. The E-Assessment Association was formed in 2008. It has members from across all sectors in education, and it helps to promote better assessment of knowledge, skills and capabilities of people through technology. We have institutions and organisations as members, which is very useful. So it helps us to build awareness of technologies that are happening now. It's useful to get the insights from the people that are building the systems. It's all about learning and efficiency of using technology to do that. So that's very important. And one of the things that we are ensure that we do is we have a strong voice across the sector, so that we'll be able to influence policy and practice through government and other important associations. But before we actually go into the next part of this, I think we need to have a message from our sponsor, RM Results.
Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 of the e-assessment question. My name is Tim Downey. I'm Sales and Marketing Director for RM Results. We're delighted to be the headline sponsor for this year's event. In this final week, we look at technology, higher education and regulation. And surely there can't be 3 more pressing topics for us to look at based upon the experiences we've all had over the last few weeks. Here at RM Results, we work closely with customers who work alongside regulators such as Ofqual and other regulators around the world to ensure that exam systems are robust and reliable, whatever circumstances students face. This week provides a fantastic opportunity for us to learn from each other, talk and discuss, as we did in the first week, to think about what the future might look like and how we can adapt. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the speakers and engaging with discussion around the event. I hope you are too, and thank you very much for taking the time to engage in these important topics. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So thanks, Tim, that was great. So if you have got questions for the presenters, you can submit them as you're listening to the talks. We have a box that opens directly next to the presentation, and feel free to add any comments in there. They'll be picked up by our team. We've also got a Twitter account, so if you're using Twitter, you can go and use the hashtag ESS20, and our team will pick up any of the comments that are made there. You can also email us if you don't have any of the other 2 options, but you can email us at live@eassessment.com. So the agenda for today are 3 talks, each in turn will have 20 minutes, and then there'll be some time for 1 or 2 questions at the end of each talk. And then what we're going to do is bring everybody back together for a Q&A session where we can ask some more questions. So yeah, so just think about your questions, and there'll be plenty of time for those. So our first talk for today is from Lucy Turner, who's the Assistant Program Manager for Education at Nesta. Now, Nesta is actually primarily for before you get to university, but I think it's still important to hear about the things that are happening across the other sectors of education, because they all influence higher education in some way. The talk is actually about it's from the Innovation Fund, and it's actually going to be quite interesting to see how what's happening with her innovation affects higher education. So Lucy, over to you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. As Fiona said, my name's Lucy Turner and I'm an Assistant Programme Manager at Nesta, and I work in our education team. So I'm going to be talking this afternoon about some of the EdTech organisations that we support through the EdTech Innovation Fund, showing some of the things that we've learned along the way with them, and particularly thinking about how technology can help reduce teacher workload and support teachers and students in other ways. So just quickly, a few things about Nesta in case you're not familiar with this. We're an innovation foundation and we're based in the UK. And for us, innovation means working to bring bold ideas to life to change the world for good, which is a very ambitious mission, but we achieve that in lots of different ways. So we work across a few different thematic areas. That includes health, government innovations, looking at how data is used, and of course, education. So we work on quite a wide range of areas, and you might have come across this in a few different ways. And some of the types of things that we do to achieve our mission include research, so commissioning and undertaking our own research. We run challenge prizes to find new and innovative solutions to some of the key challenges. And we work with partners and give out grant funding to support early stage ideas and innovators who are really striving to achieve social impact. So quite an array of ways that we work towards this mission. And so, as I mentioned, I work in our education team, and our broad vision for the education team is that we want to support a broader, fairer and smarter education system where all learners thrive and everybody's able to gain the skills and knowledge that they need to achieve a good future and to have the learning that's right for them and is relevant for the work that they want to do. So that includes, of course, looking at academic learning, but also social and emotional skills, EdTech, and helping to encourage innovation in the classroom with teachers and students. And so some of the ways that we, again, work towards this mission is we undertake research, we advocate for policy change, we work with partners and convene our networks, and we support early stage ideas, helping them to scale and increase the impact that they have with schools and teachers across the UK. So one of our main strands of work in the education team, and the part that I primarily work on, is researching and supporting the use of technology in schools and colleges. And so we particularly want to help teachers make more effective use of technology to tackle some of the key challenges. So those include, of course, teacher workload, which I'll touch on a bit more, improving well-being, supporting student outcomes, and engaging with parents, families, and community networks. So we think there's a range of ways that technology can help, and it's really about encouraging schools and teachers to make smarter use of that, and supporting the EdTech sector to better meet those challenges. Of course, I'll have to start early on to say it, but we are living in the time of coronavirus, and since the school closures in March, we've obviously seen a great opportunity for technology to become even more embedded and vital in the way that remote learning is delivered, the way that teachers engage with their students. And so we think this brings with it a lot of opportunities, but also areas that need some careful consideration to further embed the use of technology in the classroom and beyond. So one of our biggest EdTech programmes is the EdTech Innovation Fund. And this is part of a broader partnership which we launched in April 2019, and we're working with the Department for Education on this. And this stream of work comes from the DFE's EdTech strategy, which was also launched last year, and includes a range of ways that they want to interrogate, research and support the education system to make better use of technology. And so one of our main areas of work to do with this is our EdTech Innovation Fund, where we give out grant funding to support EdTech startups and small organisations who are working in primarily 4 areas. So those are formative assessment, essay marking, parental engagement and timetabling. And the grant funding that we've given out is helping to support 3 main areas. So the first of that is improvements. So we're supporting products to test and develop new features, new parts of their platforms to increase their impact and even meet even better those needs of teachers and students. We see that EdTech companies are very iterative and their platforms involve a lot of development. So we're really keen that they do that in a way that meets demand, not just, the next flashy thing to develop. The second area is implementation. This is particularly important. And so we know that if products want to expand their reach and to engage with even more schools and colleges, students and teachers, there needs to be really careful support behind how users are expected to engage in their platforms. So we're working with companies to test out the ways that they provide that support and improve and increase their capacity to help teachers make the best of their product. And lastly, the area is evidence. So we know that there is quite a hole in the EdTech sector when it comes to evidence. It's just not very easy, and it's quite hard to know what works, what's effective, and it's very difficult in education anyway to attribute any kind of outcomes to a particular intervention. And so we're helping organisations to try to build up their evidence base for what works and to better understand the impact their product has. So that's through things like testing prototypes, running focus groups, running small-scale trials, which is coming up with some really interesting areas, and I think is a good push for the organisations to increase the evidence that they're gathering. So we started supporting organisations in November last year, and I just wanted to give you a snapshot of who we are working with. This is quite a busy slide, but hopefully just gives you a sense of the sorts of organisations. So there's 15 organisations, and they range from small startups with maybe a few people working on them who are developing quite early ideas. So organisations such as Engagement in Education and StudyBugs, who are two of our parental engagement platforms. And we kind of work with organisations of that scale and then right through to larger ones. So organisations such as Seneca and Firefly, who you might have heard of, who are supporting thousands of schools and millions of students every week. So it's really interesting to work across this range. And what's great in our portfolio is that we have organisations who work across all subjects, all education phases, right from early years up to college. So it's brilliant to see the innovation that comes out of all these different stages and how the platforms that are developed for primary schools differ from those from secondary and college. I would just say, as well as these sort of commercial startups that we work with, we're really pleased to be able to develop and support some really early stage ideas that are developed by colleges and universities. So we're working with Bolton College, who are developing First Pass, which is an assessment and feedback platform. And I think Aftab spoke earlier in the conference, perhaps last week. So some of you might have caught his presentation there. And we're also working with the University of Oxford, who are developing a numeracy app that's used by teaching assistants for early year students. So it's great to have this range. And I think just a quick comment on these organisations is that there's a really thriving sector in the UK to do with EdTech and small startups who are often set up by former teachers or partners of teachers, we find, who have got a real passion and are really invested in what they do. And I think we feel like there's such scope for innovation in this sector because these organisations are smaller, they can be more adaptive. Whereas we know that some of the bigger tech names, such as Google, Apple, Microsoft, are supporting up to 90% of schools in the UK. We think it's important that these smaller organisations get the support to push their innovations forward and see what's possible. So turning now to how we think that EdTech platforms can best tackle teacher workload and support teachers. So there's a range of ways that we think this happens, and it's a factor that's really important for us and is especially an objective of our fund, as we know that vast amounts of teachers leave the profession each year, and I think the stat I've heard is 40% of teachers leave within 5 years, often citing workload and stress. So if we can tackle this issue, we can keep some of that talent in the profession. It's a really important thing for us to try to do. So this slide just shows a few areas that we think EdTech platforms particularly help tackle workload. So the first is through providing resources. So we see platforms that are able to give teachers full lesson plans that align to the curriculums, teaching resources such as videos, podcasts, worksheets for their students to work through, and of course, question banks and quizzes for their students to progress. So this is a really key way, and we hear from teachers that this is a really useful part of the platforms they engage with. They can pluck a lesson plan that's totally developed and they can just take it into their classroom or deliver that remotely, or they can pick and choose and adapt things that work for them and share with other teachers. Assessment is the second big area that we know can help with teacher workload. So most of the EdTech platforms we work with are able to do automatic marking, particularly of kind of quantitative answers from quizzes and questions, but we're also seeing some innovation and some platforms that are able to mark long form essays and text answers, which I think is a really exciting area and has potential for great benefit. Alongside this help with feedback and marking is the data insights that EdTech platforms are able to provide. So we know that EdTech platforms gather a wealth of data, and what's really exciting is seeing how these insights are shared with teachers. So they're able to get a sense of not just their kind of individual students' progress, but how their class is doing, how that compares to the year group, and schools share that data between mats. So all of that data is helping to target interventions and help teachers become kind of more effective and efficient because they just know more about their students. Feedback is the third area. So a lot of these platforms, similar to the automatic marking, give personalised feedback to the students, or they facilitate teachers to do that through the platform, helping to make that more efficient and provide adaptive next steps. So we see a lot of platforms that focus on this personalised learning journey for the students to progress through, and they can offer feedback that's really targeted for individual students, which is great. Another area that I get quite excited about is some of the platforms help to enable and facilitate peer support. So supporting students to give feedback to each other and helping to empower students with their learning, which is a really exciting thing for us to see. And then the last area that we're seeing is parental engagement. So lots of these platforms enable teachers to build relationships with parents, make sharing information and communicating more efficient and effective. And also a really important way to engage with parents who typically might not engage with the schools in the ways that have been on offer. So it might be difficult for them to come to parents' evening. They might not get involved in extra groups or feel confident to engage, but they might feel like they're able to do that through a text message or an app on their phone or a video call. So that's quite an exciting area of innovation that we're seeing at the moment. So I just wanted to touch on a few examples to give you a flavour of what these platforms are doing and who we're working with. So the first one that I'll mention is Seneca. So I said that they're kind of one of our largest organisations, and they're currently supporting 3.7 million students a week. With the last count, they've seen a huge increase during the coronavirus pandemic and since schools have been closed. And so they're primarily a homework and revision platform, but they're being used to set remote work as well for students to work through. And they go right from Key Stage 2 up until A-level, covering the curriculum. And they do lots of content, so videos, podcasts, explainers, and then students work their way through set assessments and questions. And what Seneca do that's really exciting is this, their strength is this personalised learning journey. And so they're able to really make the journey adaptive. The feedback and the nudges that the students get are all targeted at their journey and where they need help with their learning, which is really kind of innovative way that we're seeing these platforms work. And they particularly provide these data insights for teachers. So it's not just about teachers being able to see how much of work student has completed, but also how long they spent on a question, where they made common mistakes, where they kept getting something wrong, what's worked well for them, so they can really target that support much more. And we know that Seneca is saying, and they're hearing from teachers that are using them, how helpful that will be come September, thinking about catch up for students, being able to get a really good sense of where those pinch points and those gaps are will mean that those catch-up plans can be much more targeted. Pobble are the second organisation I'll mention. So they work in primary schools and they are a platform which help with writing. It's quite exciting. It was set up by a teacher, and the way it works is that students or teachers take a photo of a student's written work and upload it to the platform. That can then be shared with other classmates, with other teachers, and the teachers are able to give feedback directly through the platform to the students. But what I love about this is just the ability to share things. So the reason it was set up, the founder was a teacher and found that it took him a long time to find real examples of children's written work that he wanted to share with his class, not just from a textbook, but other articles, past work from different years, other schools. And so he found that took up a lot of time, so created this platform to allow him to do that digitally, which is, I think, great to see how invested a lot of these EdTech companies are in what they do and their experiences. So as well as this feedback, Pod will provide full lesson plans and resources, which we know is a great help to teachers. And they've heard that particularly during coronavirus, that feature has been really well used by teachers, just knowing that they've got high quality plans and resources they can set their class or they can share. And as well as supporting teachers in that way, Pobble also allows teachers to connect with each other, so they can do moderation and feedback online, share best practice, and collaborate with teachers that they might not normally have the opportunity to. And the last thing I wanted to mention about Pobble is this peer feedback feature. So they're supporting students to comment on each other's work, provide feedback and suggestions, and that's all done within a metric that the teachers design. So students are given a structure to do that in. They don't just say whatever they think. But we think that's really exciting, and it's, yeah, again, a great kind of example of giving students more agency and helping to support teachers to do that. And the last example I wanted to share with you is an organisation called Text Help, who have a product called Ryq. And this is particularly exciting. I've got a short video that I'll show you in a moment. But what Ryq do is a tool that can assess long form text and essays. And we know that this is an area that if the tech can be developed and we can tap into it, has the potential to have really big benefits. When we started the fund, it was a learning for us that we thought there'd be more in this kind of essay marking long form text answer section than there is. So formative assessment platforms that do quizzes and questions and give that sort of feedback, there's quite a lot in the market, but this longer form text assessment is much less. So this is a really exciting example, and the way that it works is that they do automatic marking of grammar, spelling and punctuation, working within a metric set by the teachers. And what we think is exciting is that it allows teachers then more time to, assess the parts of essays that technology can't. So looking at the nuance and the meaning behind work. So for us, it's really about automating those parts that can be, to free up teacher time to do the work that they are not, or spend the time they're not getting to at the moment. I'm just going to show a short video of Ryq next to give you an idea of how it works. Great, thank you. So hopefully that just gave you a flavour of how Ryq works and the sorts of things that it does. And I think the reason we are so excited about this innovation and we think it has such great potential is that teachers are still in charge of it. I think that's a really important thing to think about with EdTech, is that it's, as I said, automating those things that can be, but ultimately giving teachers more agency and more kind of resources and skills to engage and support the students in the ways that they think work best. So I think the fact that Ryq the teachers get to set it, they get so much information, and it gives those data insights. It's a really powerful way to support teachers. So I've given you a bit of a flavour about some of the organisations that we work with and the work that they do. I'm going to just talk now a little bit about what some of the opportunities and the risks are that we think need to be considered when thinking about using EdTech, and particularly to support workload and teachers. So of course, one of the opportunities, as I've mentioned, is reducing teacher workload and supporting teacher wellbeing. And although most of the ways that we see this happening is through those formative assessment and those long form essay marking skills and tools, we're also working with some really innovative timetabling companies who are coming up with ways for teachers to be able to work much more flexibly. So whether that's through things like job shares or part-time working, we think this is an area that could be developed much more. And I think particularly thinking about, the reasons teachers leave the profession and helping workload, if teachers can benefit from flexible working in the way that other sectors do, I think this would be an area of great potential. And we also know that this timetabling technology is going to be really important come September, when students might be in bubbles or moving around in classes. So ways that we can help support wellbeing in those areas will be really important. I've mentioned already a little bit about these increased insights for teachers and a greater understanding that they have of their students and their progress. So EdTech by nature develops and creates a wealth of information. And I think there's a great opportunity to make more of that and to support teachers to use those insights to a greater extent and help them to develop and make more targeted interventions. And I think that more targeted support will lead to improved student outcomes, which is, an ultimate aim of our programme and the work that we do at Nesta and the education team. And so anything that EdTech can do to facilitate and support teachers to spend more time in the ways they know is best is definitely a great plus. I think another opportunity that we see, and I touched on it a little bit with Pobble, is this opportunity for teachers to collaborate and to network with each other, sharing best practice, sharing the ideas and innovations. I think we know that for teachers that are in maths or in larger schools, those opportunities to collaborate might come more readily than, say, teachers working in small, rural or isolated schools. So the way that EdTech can support that, I think, is really exciting, and hopefully is another way to kind of boost teachers' wellbeing and their connectedness. And lastly, I think there's a great opportunity here to build teachers' confidence and skills. So not just through using new technology, which of course is important, but we hope that through introducing new technologies, kind of having those skills and those abilities to try new things helps to shift the culture in schools to become more innovative and give teachers the freedom and the confidence to try new things outside of technology, but just work in more innovative ways. So of course, those are the opportunities, and I think balancing them out a little bit by the risks is that there is a big risk, and we see in the tech sector, of technology for technology's sake. But we think that the most effective technology has to be led by real demand and the needs of teachers, their students, their classrooms. We definitely think that educators and teachers know best. They know what they need, what their students need, and that's what the EdTech should be led by, not by kind of what's the flashiest thing that can be developed. So I think that's something to always kind of, keep a check on and see what's happening there. We also know that EdTech use is not consistent and that the quality between platforms varies greatly. And so that can be difficult for teachers to try to keep up with what's happening, frustrating if they try a product that doesn't quite do what they expected it to do or they thought it would, which can increase workload and the kind of just the time and the energy of teachers to engage in that. Something that we hear quite a lot is the cupboard of shame. And so, a school or a teacher might be really excited about a piece of tech, bring it in before really looking at how it actually fits in the classroom. Does it do what we need it to do? They try it a few times, it doesn't really work, it goes in the cupboard of shame. And so I think the more we can reduce that and help teachers make more effective use of tech, the better, really. And that comes to this other point about this multitude of platforms. So it's great the UK has a really thriving EdTech sector with lots of innovation and new organisations, but it has the potential to increase workloads if teachers are having to, wade through a lot of choice to find what they need. but we also hear about schools which are using various EdTech platforms in different classes across year groups and departments. And it's a lot of work for teachers if they're expected to, learn the skills, understand a platform, engage with it, provide content for it, engage with students and teachers on it. So I think something around that kind of lack of coherence and making sure that any platforms that are used work seamlessly together is really important. And we know from a parent and family point of view that can also be frustrating if you've got children in different schools or different year groups who are using different parental engagement platforms. It can be a frustrating experience. The next is something I've mentioned before, this kind of lack of robust and consistent evidence, but it's really important if schools and teachers are going to invest their time and their budget into bringing on a new piece of technology, onboarding, learning how to use it, getting their students used to it. They want to know that it's something that's going to have an impact. And we know it's difficult to do that in education. It's so contextual, and a piece of tech in one classroom with one set of students might look and feel very different to another class. But I think it's really important that we keep pushing the sector to develop this evidence. And historically, there's been quite few and low incentives for technology companies to invest in evidence. But we're certainly seeing a change in that now. And it's something that's an important part of our programme. I think that coming with that kind of lack of evidence is this lack of knowledge and information for teachers to make informed decisions. So it's not just about having the evidence there about the piece of tech, but having the information in a way that's accessible, appropriate, useful, practical, so that teachers can really find what they need to make a decision. And it's not just on, what seems the flashiest and has the best sales pitch. And then lastly, I would just touch on, there's the risks around data governance, security and ethics. So I've mentioned before, and by their nature, EdTech platforms develop this great wealth of data, which is brilliant for the insights, but it's data around young people and students. And so that just needs to be something that's thought carefully about by EdTech companies when they are developing their products, but also by teachers in schools when they're thinking about which products to bring on board. And so lastly, I'm just going to do a few points and a look to the future. So as I said, we are really excited about the potential for this technology to revolutionise marking and feedback and the insights and information that teachers have about their students. And not to finish on coronavirus, but we know, as I said, that it's seen this rapid increase in the use of technology for remote learning, assessments, engaging with students, understanding how they're doing. But I think that it's kind of important to just temper that, as it's been held as this catalyst for greater technology use, and this is the way that technology becomes embedded. But I think there is risks around. In September, we see teachers and students turning away from that and going back to a return to traditional teaching and feeling like everyone's looked at enough screens for a while. And also we know that there are lots of students who haven't been able to engage in this technology during school closures because they don't have the devices and the broadband. So I think for technology to be effective, we need to think about how it can be more accessible for everybody. And I think I would just end on saying that a really key point for us, and the last point I'd like to kind of iterate, is that for the benefits to be seen and to be sustained, teachers have got to have access to really high quality and ongoing support to use that technology. It doesn't matter if it's the best piece of tech in the world, if teachers aren't able to use it and it doesn't do what they think it should do for them and it doesn't meet that demand, it's not going to have the impact that it can do. So that's just a few things, that we're thinking about looking to the future for technology and assessment. And the organisations we're working with, I mentioned that we started funding them in November last year, and they'll be working with us until March 2021. So do check our website and, do get in touch with us if you want to hear how they're getting on. I think it's going to be really exciting to see what comes out of them, and particularly what happens in September and how these organisations and their platforms have to adapt to support the new learning environments and new schools that we're going to see going forward. So there are a few contact details for me. Please do email me if you would like to follow up with any questions after this afternoon, if you have anything you'd like to discuss. And there's our details for Nesta's website. And I would recommend, if you're interested, do sign up for our newsletter to keep in the loop with all that we're doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you. That's absolutely fascinating, Lucy. Thank you so much. There are lots of correlations there between higher education and schools and colleges. So I think it was very useful to hear, especially things like the online assessment being marked automatically. That is something that's definitely important. And also the aspect of ethics. So that's overlooked, I think, a lot. People just rush into these things. So I think providers, people producing these platforms should be writing privacy into those platforms, a privacy first kind of approach. I don't think people know enough about it to be able to make those decisions otherwise. But a question before we go into the other questions. Do you think, you mentioned before about people needing confidence and about the support people needed from the platforms. There is a lot of resistance to jumping into new technologies. People are afraid of using those kind of technologies. How much support do you think teachers need to encourage them to actually start to use these and not to just fall back on their old, I know what's right, I've been teaching for 20 years, I don't want to change anything?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the more the better, I think we would say. And I think it has to be not just the support at the point that the technology is brought in. So we know a lot of companies will do great onboarding and they've maybe got a customer service line. And so teachers feel like they're set up well, but that's very different to then being in your classroom. It's not doing what you thought it would. You've got, 30 students waiting. And so I think what we would say is it's about this ongoing support. So it's not just when you first start using it, but as you find out ways you want to adapt it, how it works for you. So I think that's one thing I would say from the tech side. But then from the school side, I think what we see quite a lot is that individual teachers will be the kind of tech evangelist for their school or the person pushing for it. And what I'm seeing a lot in the sector now is more schools being encouraged to think about what's your digital strategy, what's your EdTech strategy, so that I think if teachers feel like this technology fits well with what they're doing and they can see that it's part of a strategic, sustained thing, not just a new idea, because we know that teachers are bombarded with the next thing, the new thing to try. So I think it's about feeling like it really fits with your practice and that it's becoming embedded. It's not just a kind of flash in the pan.
One-off.
That's
great. Thank you so much, Lucy. At the end, we'll bring you back in and well, I'm sure there'll be some more questions. I've got more questions. I'm just holding off for now, but thank you very much. Thank you. So now we're going to go on to our next talk. The day is about the uses of e-portfolios for academic practice and also for professional practice. It's going to be from Dr. Fiona Meddings, and she's a senior lecturer in midwifery at Bradford University. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. As Fiona just said, that I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Bradford, and my presentation today is about how we use e-portfolios to support students in their academic studies. So we've got two programs, an MSc and a BSc in midwifery studies, and we've been using Pebblepad portfolios since 2005. We piloted an e-portfolio, and it's really for us about supporting students with their development in terms of personalised and professional learning. And as you'll see as we go through the presentation, we use the portfolios across the whole programme. So one of the other things I think it's important to say is our programme is based on problem-based learning, and we get students using portfolios week 1, semester 1 in year 1. So at the end of induction week, we start supporting students to develop portfolios, which helps them keep a track or a record of their problem-based learning scenarios that we use for students. I think the introduction to using the portfolio helps with their use across the whole programme. Students we put students in groups, they collaborate, and this facilitates them retrieving information from various sources to answer the questions that they set to their scenarios. So this is an example of a group portfolio for Pebblepad. there's no formal assessment of PBL, but we do have weekly discussions and reviews of their contributions, looking at the information they've retrieved, where they've got it from. We look at students' writing style. We talk about the sources they've used. We talk about referencing style, and all of this fosters a formative development and discussion and debate on the information that's retrieved. And I think that's quite important, because we want to try and get students developing good academic practice from as early on as possible. The other area in which we use Pebblepad portfolios is in clinical practice placement. So students undertaking a midwifery degree, either the BSc or the MSc, it's a 3-year programme, and our professional bodies say that 50% of that programme must be undertaken in clinical practice. So they work out in hospital trusts with clinical midwives who become their practice supervisors and or practice assessors. So we provide practice assessment guidance for the practice assessors and supervisors, and this is evident within a portfolio. This facilitates practice assessors and practice supervisors being able to remind themselves of the process once they're in a student portfolio. The clinical assessment, we try and ensure the way that it's set up is that make sure that it's the right person doing the assessment at the right time, and at the right designation. So we've got assessor fields where students can't obviously put any feedback in. We've taken a long time to develop the structure of trying to ensure that portfolios are easily accessible by practice supervisors and practice assessors, but also accessible by academics and accessible by students. And in a sense, we've managed to develop the IT competence and IT resilience of clinical staff, because we've had these portfolios for 2005, 15 years. We've developed the clinical practice element of the portfolio in 2011. So we've had 9 years of clinical staff using electronic means to report on students' development in practice settings. And this, in a sense, paved the way for trusts to NHS trusts to introduce their electronic patient records. In our local trust, that was 18 months ago. The other thing that we do is, so students have a workbook for clinical practice placement. We make it a workbook because we want to ensure that we've defined what elements are in there to make sure that students meet the requirements of the midwifery programme. And we've now organised these in the year group that the student arrive, and we've got a workspace which lasts for 3 years. So rather than having separate elements submitted to separate assessment areas, it gets quite complex. We've got a 3-year programme, we've got MSc students, BSc students. They do 2 placements each year, so that could be between 6 and 12 different areas for assessment. So that's why we've shrunk it down into one area for each group when they arrive. So the students that start this September, they will have a practice space where they submit their clinical practice placement workbook, and that will last in that space for 3 years. We just add workbooks in for each year beyond that. Sounds complex, but it does work. And this is just a little example of what the inside of the portfolio might look like. So they've got things that they need to achieve. So EC numbers, so their European Community guidance that we need to meet still at the moment. And then we've got essential skills clusters, And then down this left-hand side, you can see it says introduction. So this is what in each workbook might look like inside. So we've got introduction, orientation, etc. So we've got two students who were talking about their practice placements. Could we have the video?
Pebblepad is a really excellent tool for health degrees. It allows you to record your episodes of care contemporaneously so that you can reflect back on those episodes of care that you've given, and sometimes then do either reflective work or further academic work to support your learning. Equally, it allows you to see how far that you've come and how much you've progressed. So I think especially for health related courses and recording clinical placement, I think it's an excellent tool.
Thank you. And the next.
Pebblepad has been a real great asset for me working clinically. I feel that it's really helped me to be able to document everything, and so that my mentors and assessors can have a look at my progress. It's also helped me collate everything that I've been able to do, and then look back and reflect on the work that I've been able to do to make sure that I'm a progressive practitioner through my midwifery degree.
And then from 2016, when we brought in the current version of the midwifery programme, so programmes need to be rewritten and revalidated on a 5-year basis. So in 2016, we brought in a new programme, which we still had 50% of it in practice, so they've got 2 practice placements. But then we moved to having just one single 60-credit module in each year. So we've got in year 1 beginning midwifery knowledge, year 2 developing midwifery knowledge, and year 3 questioning midwifery knowledge. In year 1 we develop a workbook for the students for them to be able to demonstrate their learning and their academic learning as they move through the programme. And then in the following 2 years, students have developed the skills to be able to have a self-developed portfolio, again, to be able to illustrate their academic achievement across the programme. The learning and use of portfolios doesn't really stop there. We ensure that students have got a facility to utilise the Pebblepad portfolio once they leave the institution. It's portable. And I think essentially we've moved from it being a repository for just collecting things to actually getting the students really to use it for reflecting on learning. And the ongoing benefits are as using it as students, but as a practitioner, we need to demonstrate to our professional body that we've maintained a level of knowledge and understanding, and we've got to revalidate every 3 years. We've also in the institution begun to use this for fellowship application to, it was the Higher Education Academy, but now it's Advanced HE, so to apply for fellowship there. But can we play the videos for the 2 students, please?
I think using Pebblepad for academic studies has been helpful within some respects. For me personally, it's helped me focus more on reflection of my academic capability when I've been at university.
And the second one?
I think Pebblepad for my academic element of my midwifery degree has been really worthwhile. It's helped me have a focus on my learning gains, and in particular looking at the Johari window and being able to reflect across the 3 years as to how far I've progressed, both academically and clinically. Equally, it helps sort of bring together all the studies that we've learned academically, where we may then use it to put into a blog, some literature that we've found, and then reflect that back to clinical practice. So I do think it's been a really valuable tool.
Thank you. So hopefully you can see some of this, but this is an example from one student portfolio, and we've got a tab in there called Learning Gains, and there's a number of little things in there. So we asked the students to develop a Johari window, and this is an example of some work done by a student in a master's student in a first year. So the picture at the back with the 4 elements of the Johara window was something that she did in year 1. I think it was in week 2 or 3, we get the students to do a Johara window to think about what their what things they know about themselves, working with in teams, working with others in terms of the communication skills, and then we ask them to ask for feedback from others on what they think about themselves. And it's really interesting because obviously the Johara window, there's 4 elements to it. So there's the public self, so stuff that you know about yourself and everybody else knows. There's the hidden or private self, so the stuff you only know about yourself and others don't know. There's the blind self, so the stuff that everybody else can see about you, but you can't see yourself. And there's the unconscious thing. And what this student did was then she reviewed this after she'd been on her first clinical placement. And she was really interested to note that although she feels really anxious, other people don't see it. And although she feels that she's, because of her anxiety, that she doesn't feel that she communicates particularly well, the feedback she got from a clinical placement was her communication was excellent. She seemed really calm, that the women really liked her. So she was really quite blown away by what other people saw in her that she didn't know about herself. And this is just one example of something that we do with students that I think can be quite, can help them change and help them think about the way that they come across in, not just in clinical situations, but build their confidence in their academic capabilities. So essentially, we build assessment into this personalised portable portfolio, but it's assessment for learning, it's not assessment of learning. We try and get students to engage in a number of activities which will help them demonstrate their knowledge and their skill, and then we assess that at the end of it. So thank you. If there's any questions.
That was great. Thank you, Fiona. That was really interesting. I've used a Pebblepad portfolio before, but many years ago. It's come a long way and it's very detailed. Do you think the students will use this outside of academic work ongoing? Do you think they, I know that one of the students mentioned that she thought about her clinical practice, but generally, do you think that's used?
I think the great thing about this is because these students have used it all the way through their programme, it will then be less of an incumbent to think about putting a portfolio together for use for revalidation with our professional body. So every 3 years, we've got to demonstrate our maintenance of knowledge and skills. So we've got to demonstrate how many clinical hours we've worked, how many what training courses or study days or reading we've done, and then also engage in some reflective activities to have a reflective discussion with another practitioner. So these students are absolutely well set up for that because it's something they've been used to over the last 3 years.
They've done from day one.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really good. And I'm sure at the moment where people are looking at, obviously what's happening with COVID, and they're having to come up with different ways of assessment and thinking about, instead of just having exams, they could actually use an e-portfolio tool across the year as opposed to having everything at the one end thing.
And that's what's really great about this, because it's a whole year. It's across the whole year.
It's not just 1 point. That's brilliant. That's lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we'll invite you back in at the end for a quick roundup and some questions. That's great.
All right.
Thank you. Great. That's really interesting. So we're going on to our final presentation of the day. This presentation shows how student data is being used more effectively for student engagement and with their assessment through meaningful feedback. The presenter is Professor Emma Mayhew. She's the Academic Director for Electronic Management of Assessment Programme at Reading University. So over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can see my slides. I was the Academic Director of the Electronic Management Assessment Programme at the university, which finished in January 2020. As of this week, I've actually moved to the University of Surrey as one of their Associate Deans, but I'm going to talk about the work that I did during that period at the University of Reading. And in particular, the Assessment Analytics Dashboard, or Student Progress Dashboard, as we called it. This was developed as part of a really large multi-million pound EMA programme that was in operation, as I said, in Reading, and that lasted for 4 years between 2016 and 2020. In this really large programme, we did an awful lot of work supporting the university to move from a kind of pocketed approach to online submission feedback and grading to a more institution-wide approach. And also to the delivery of individual assessment marks to our student record system. We did a big piece of work to make sure all of those granular individual assessment marks were available on that student record system in January 2018, so a little bit earlier on in the project. And what that work that we did in the first couple of years of that programme meant was that students could receive their marks for each of their pieces of assessment on our VLE on Blackboard, and many students have been able to do that for a long time within Reading, within a 15 working day period. But to find their feedback and to find their marks, they had to go into each of the relevant sections of each module in Blackboard that they were enrolled in. But we wanted to go further than this and really develop what we are able to offer students by delivering some kind of platform that would allow them to see all of their assessment data in one place, to give them more information that they already saw on Blackboard that they've been experiencing for many years, and also to think about how we might be able to use visuals to show them how they were doing. So if I move on, we had those kind of thoughts in mind, but there were some really specific drivers. We, as I said, had that individual assessment data in our student record system, which was called SITS, but we wanted to do more with it. We wanted students to better understand how they were doing in their assessment, and we really wanted students to self-reflect on their progress. And as a result of that self-reflection, it may well be that some students would be changing some of their assessment behaviours and practices. So we were thinking about how we could use that new data that we had access to create something that allowed students and encouraged students to self-reflect on how they were doing in their assessment. But we also wanted this information to be more easily accessible to students, to increase transparency around their assessment data. And we also wanted to give staff who are involved in supporting students enough granular performance data to help enhance some of the conversations that they were having with their students. So a team from the University of Reading and from Tribal, who provide us with our student record system, work really closely together to develop a new platform within our existing student record system, SITS. We involved academic staff and support staff and current students, and also graduate students, the student union, all involved in the design and development of testing to make sure that the platform, the dashboard that we actually created, really met everybody's requirements. So, for example, we had students sitting on our project board, helping with colour choice and content, with when we launched it, with some of our communications to students in particular, and we had them volunteering in our testing phases. And we had actually had a programme's full-time University of Reading graduate playing a really critical role in the design, delivery and testing. So now when students log into the student record system, then they're very used to doing that. It's an existing platform that they use. But now when they log in, there's an additional option to access the dashboard that we've created from them. So when they log in, they see this as their front page. So this is the main tab that students see in their new dashboard. You'll see across the top there are a series of 4 tabs, and I'm going to run through these in turn. But it's important to note at the start that all of the data that we're showing them here focuses on their summative assessments and doesn't include their formative assessment. And it's focusing in on their summative assessment for the part they're currently in and for the academic year that they are currently in. The data that you can see here in this example mock student is pulled into the dashboard from Blackboard, from our VLE. So remember, students already have got their marks and their feedback back on Blackboard, so they'll have access to those within a certain period of them submitting their work. This is an additional platform that we're offering so that we're visualizing and giving additional information about those marks. So we were able to pull the data in from Dashboard into SITS, because we've achieved a level of integration between those two platforms, a level of systems integration, which means that the flow of data is very regular and largely automated between the VLE and our student record system. It does require a professional member of staff to press a button, so it's not automatic, but there is a level of automation. So this is the main screen. The figure in the top left that you can see here that says 56.3 in this mock example, that is intended to give students an indication of how they're doing so far in their particular part in the particular year, according to their summative data. The dashboard looks at all the work that students have got back so far, and it takes that into account, the value, the weighting of each of the pieces, to give a running part average. And in fact, this is the piece of data that students found most helpful when we asked them later on. The donut on the right-hand side also takes into account the weighted value of each piece of assessment, but this time it's a graphic. It shows how much work has been finished and the student has got the mark back, and then how much is still to go. So in this example here, it's just over a quarter of the work that a student is due to submit for that year that the student has actually got back, and they've got the marks back, and then the rest, coloured in green, is the amount of the weight according to the weighted value of work that the student hasn't actually got back yet. At the bottom, you can see a bar chart, and this shows how students have done on their last few pieces of assessment. So you might just be able to see on the left-hand side the module code, the value of that piece of assessment within the module, and a little bit of information you can just about see about what type of coursework that was. So the bar chart is showing the last few pieces of assessment the student has got in. There's two things I wanted to highlight about this. First is the colour coding. There's an option in another screen for students to set their goal in terms of what marks they would like to be getting. So in the other screen, they might tell Dashboard that they'd like to score, for example, between 55 and 65 for all of their assessments. So that other screen is completely optional. They don't have to engage with that goal setting feature in any way at all. And if they do, they can go back and they can change it whenever they like. They can also decide whether they would like to share that information with staff or whether they just want to keep that to themselves. So if the student does engage in the goal setting feature, the dashboard then colour codes their performance against this target range. So you can see in this example, there's a coloured in section between 55 and 65, and you can see how each of the individual pieces of assessment sits in relation to that target, whether the student has achieved more than their goal, they've achieved their goal, or they've just a little bit missed out on what they had hoped to get. The other thing to highlight about this graph at the bottom is that almost all students, of course, will receive more than 10 assessment marks across their modules in their part in their current academic year. We couldn't fit any more on to the screen, so there's a little button at the bottom that says view all assessments and brackets table. If users click on that button, they can then toggle onto a table. So it just looks like this if you click on that button. So instead of a graph, this shows all of the assessment, the individual summative assessment marks due. And what's helpful here is that you can order according to each of the headings. You may not be able to read those, but the headings are assessment detail, the module, the type, the status, and the mark. Assessment weight and goal status. So for example, if you clicked on one of those headings, you could see how much you've done, how well you've done in one type of coursework compared to another. So for example, how well you've done in exams in comparison to coursework. In fact, that's already been clicked on that example there. So you can see the coursework's all been grouped and the exams have all been grouped. Or you can order in terms of highest marks to lowest marks. So that gives students and staff members an ability to look at performance against different types of coursework and perhaps performance over time as well. So it just gives a little bit of additional information for users to then start to analyse performance in different types of coursework. Okay, so that's the main tab. The second tab over at the top is called module current part. This is focusing more on modules rather than overall performance, which is what that first tab is really looking at. So this one is looking much more at modules. It shows which modules a student has enrolled in and how they have done so far in those modules. Again, taking into account the weighting of each piece of assessment. So you can see in this mock example here that a student is enrolled in a number of modules. The module code is underneath each of those columns, the credit value, and you can also see how much has been completed in each of those modules. So for example, 1 out of 2 pieces of assessment has been completed. And again, the column is showing the weighted performance against each of those modules. And again, you can also see that the chart is color-coded according to the students' target goals that they've put in if they've chosen to engage in that feature. So you've got that green stripe across the sort of 55 to 65 again. And you can see, or a student or a staff member can see if a student has exceeded their goal, met their goal, or just fallen a little bit short. You can look at more information. So if I click on one of those bars, on one of those modules, one of those columns, I get a little bit more information. I can see all of the individual pieces of work that a student is expected to submit in this module, just 2 in this case. So one piece here has been finished and marked, and the other one is outstanding. And if I want more information still, I can drill down again. I can click on the chart and I get a little table with further information about each of the assessments due in the module in this table. So these are the 2 main dashboard tabs. The third one over is called My Feedback, and this provides students with some additional guidance and advice for them to make absolutely as much as they possibly can from the feedback that has been provided. So there's some links to additional study advice, for example, and a guide that study advice have been promoting. And the fourth tab over is called Guidance and Help. So as well as the additional information about feedback, there is links on this site to further sources of academic and pastoral support which students may like to engage in order to enable them again to get the most out of their feedback and the most of their time at university. One of the things that we felt was important to add here was links to programme specifications and module descriptions. We wanted students to be aware of and make sure that they understood properly what their programme specifications were telling them in terms of the weighting. For example, second year, the second year is worth 1/3 and the third year is worth 2/3. And we also wanted them to have a better understanding about whether they needed to pass, to what extent they need to pass core modules. So the way that the progression and classification is worked out, we felt was an important aspect for students to understand. So that's why we deliberately highlighted those links to programme specifications and module descriptions on the site. So we were really pleased with the engagement that we got. We launched this dashboard after quite an intense period of work on it. We launched it to students in November 2019, so it's really quite new still. As of, I think this morning, I just looked and we'd had 64,000 views of the dashboard by both staff and students. So that counts every time a staff or student member is going and looking at a student record. And as we expected, most of these views, around 93%, are from students looking at their own data. The rest is from staff views. So that will be people like academic tutors who have regular conversations with their personal tutees about their performance over time. So we've got a large number of student users and staff users. We did create a survey because obviously we wanted to know far more about student and staff responses, particularly student responses to the dashboard. So we surveyed 218 students earlier on this year in January, February time. And the rest of the slides are going to really be focusing in on what that student response has been. Just in terms of usage, the majority, just over 65%, said that they would be looking at their dashboard 5 times or more during the year. So this was a feature, a new platform that they felt they would be regularly engaging with. In terms of the broader student response, we were really pleased to see that when we asked if students liked it or didn't like it, over 93% said that they did like it. And just over 85% also said that they felt more satisfied with their assessment experience at the University of Reading now that the dashboard is available to them. We also asked students to explain how they felt about the dashboard in free text comments, and then I thematically analysed the results to see thematically analysed the results to see what the core areas were. And the graph here shows the key themes. So the most popular response was around being able to better understand progress. So the numbers have fallen off this chart a little bit, but that was about 100 students that said in some way in that free text comments that actually they were better able to understand progress with the dashboard in place. There were also comments around how clear the dashboard was and how it made students feel more positive about their performance. So some students were saying, actually, I'm doing a lot better than I thought I was, and also helping to identify where to improve. We saw repetitively students saying that actually have been doing my own calculations on an Excel spreadsheet to try and understand where I am in terms of my overall weighted average this year. And so they were saying in the survey that actually didn't have to do that work anymore because Reading were providing them with that calculation. And also a theme that came up repeatedly was about the visualization of data and how important that was, how students found it easier to actually engage when that data is visualized. There were also some comments around the data not being available quickly enough. We do have that process where marks come through from Blackboard, where the students will already have seen their marks, through to the dashboard, and students sometimes were saying actually that's not quick enough. They'd like to see the dashboard updated more quickly, and there were some queries about some of the functionality. For example, sometimes the transition when you click on a button was too slow. So a few things for us to work on. Most also felt that they got more feedback through the dashboard, and that it would improve tutorial conversations. So that was really important to us because that was a really key feature. Just a few more stats. 94% said that they were taking action to change their assessment behaviours as a direct result. And this was really important to us because this just highlights how data can be really important in terms of encouraging behavioural change. So just to give you an example of some of the ways in which students were saying that their behaviour might change as a result of engaging with the dashboard. Just over 93% said that they felt it would help them to self-reflect on their progress, which is exactly what we were hoping to achieve through this. So that's a great result. And just over 53% said that they would actually go back and look again at the feedback they've been provided on Blackboard. And just to give you a sense of some of the other things that students were saying that they would do as a result of looking on the dashboard. So a significant number were saying that they would also analyse patterns in their performance, how well they've done in some forms of assessment in comparison to others. They might go back and readjust their goals, either in their own minds or actually on the dashboard. They might set aside more time for assessment than they had done previously. But also they said they might talk to their tutor, they might look for more academic and pastoral support as well. So I've just left on this final slide some of the comments that we received on the survey. And as I said, there's some really clear themes from students around the role of data in helping them to identify where to improve, in motivating them, in some cases in reducing stress because they were doing better than they thought. Some students did say that it made them feel a little bit nervous, and I've captured that here as well. And of course, people react very differently to data and visualising their data in this way, and that's important to remember. As I said, challenges for us, I think, surrounding getting the marks onto the dashboard, and there's a few comments there about how it is occasionally slow to display. There was also a quite consistent message from students in the survey about wanting more functionality. So we've given them this dashboard, and now and we asked them what else might be useful, and of course they engaged with that, which is really helpful. One of the things that came out really very strongly from those kinds of questions to students is that they said that they wanted, in addition to what they had on the dashboard, a calculator tool where you can input possible future marks and then work out your potential part average. Something that apparently a lot of students are doing already, but they found a kind of calculator tool, an overall weighted average calculator tool would be a really important addition. Some of them asked for an indication about how they were doing in comparison to their cohort, to other students, and others wanted graphics showing previous parts and years. So again, other things for us to be thinking about. But overall, we were really pleased. We've created this dashboard. We aren't aware of any similar dashboards across the sector, so we're really pleased with the student response that we got on the survey, and particularly the usage to date. Okay, I'll stop there.
Lovely, thank you so much. That was really interesting. Looks like a great tool for feedback for students, and obviously encouraging them to keep an eye on where their progress has been. It sounds really interesting. We have some questions already coming in. I just go to that. I find one. So there's a question from Matt Wingfield. He said, you mentioned that the dashboard is currently focused on reporting summative assessment data. Is there a plan to widen this to also cover formative data to give even better insight into progression?
So that's something that we talked about all the way through the project. The EMA, this project was part of the EMA programme. The EMA programme was really focusing on summative data. So as a result, this particular project was focusing on summative rather than formative. I think it would be really useful if that was a possibility for Reading to continue to develop the dashboard and show that formative work. So for some schools and some departments, there is a lot of formative work, and it's really useful, therefore, for people like academic tutors to be able to see their student progress in their formative as well as summative work. So when they're sitting down together, they can have those broader conversations. So in a sense, the formative is a kind of missing piece, and that would be a useful thing to include.
Yeah. Great. Okay, that's lovely. The one other question I had specifically for you is just that, do you think the students' results have improved as a result of them having more engagement with their feedback?
So we can see from the survey that the students are feeling like they're definitely going to be doing some of their things differently. Some of their behaviours will change. They feel that they're self-reflecting. We haven't looked at how that is going to impact on their specific performance, because it's really difficult to make any kind of link between creating a dashboard and then looking specifically whether student performance has gone up or down, because there's so many things that impact on student performance, particularly now with COVID. So that's quite a difficult thing for us to judge, and that's why the survey has become so important in terms of how students feel their responses to the dashboard.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I think we'll just go now to just ask for anybody if they have any questions, that they should they can use the hashtag EAssess20. They can use the email, which is live@eassessment.com, and they can also use the chat box next to the presentation. But if we bring all of us back, I can see you're all there. Hello again. Thank you for coming back. We have some questions collectively, so I'll just go to those. So Jeff Chapman has asked, with HEIs needing to positively impact their NSS assessment score, do HEIs typically have formal student advisory groups that input to choices on contemporary assessment tools and methods? So I think he's asking, do we have students involved in our assessments? Anyone can take that one. But basically, how are students involved in assessments generally?
I can start off. In a sense, we have students involved at the beginning phase, so curriculum development phase, where we're talking about assessments. We have staff-student liaison committees or boards where student reps will come to talk to staff about things that students have brought up. So some of those will be around assessment, and certainly in the aftermath or in the middle of COVID, there have had to be a number of assessment changes in order to facilitate students being able to complete assessments. So just as a quick example, we as a group of academics decided that we would take away one assessment from a group of students because it was going to be too difficult for them to do it. They said they'd already prepared for it and they wanted to do it, which was some group presentations. Some individual presentations. So we found a way of delivering those, so assessing the students using a conference facility on Canvas, which supported what the students wanted to do. So
yeah,
a quick example.
Okay, no, that's great.
And certainly in terms of the student progress dashboard, as a assessment platform, as I mentioned in my presentation, we spent an awful lot of time engaging with students because they're the main users of the dashboard, and so we obviously wanted to make sure that what we were delivering to them was the main things that they wanted to know, but also that they could understand what we were actually getting across in that data. And we were lucky enough because we had a well-funded program to actually be able to employ on a full-time basis graduate students to work with us, and one of them certainly took the lead in the creation of that dashboard, and that was really critical to get that user input all the way through.
Okay, that's great. No, I think that lots of universities really do try and engage with their students before they finalise anything. So I think that's a useful thing. Lucy, we have a question for you. Last week we heard from Dan Sandu at the EdTech Evidence Group about encouraging EdTech companies to share evidence of impact. Are Nesta working with EEG to support this wider drive?
Yes, so we know Dan, I think he's a CEO of Sparks, and while we're not kind of working in any formal way with them, we are very well engaged with the people who are part of that group. So I think some of our EdTech grantees I mentioned earlier, such as Pobble, another organisation, Hegarty Maths, I believe are part of that group. And so, yeah, we're definitely having conversations, and I think it's a big drive in the whole sector to increase evidence, and it's great to see that becoming more of a focus. So it's certainly something we are involved in conversations with and hoping to make more of our work. We have a research programme that we're hoping to launch quite soon. It's still in the planning details, which will help us kind of further that evidence base. So hopefully some exciting things to share with the sector.
Good. That sounds excellent. And Fiona, there's a question. It sounds like your school is fully behind the use of e-portfolios. Have other disciplines in the university considered using an e-portfolio for assessment? And if not, what do you think is holding them back?
Wow. Okay.
No pressure.
So in terms of e-portfolio, so in the Faculty of Health, we've got midwifery, nursing, radiography, physio, occupational therapy, paramedic science. And I know that paramedic science, nursing and radiography have used Pebblepad, used portfolio assessments in different ways for assessing different elements. And then across the institution, as I said, it's used for academics for their fellowship applications. And then also, as I understand it, I think it's, I can't remember what it's called.
So there's another one.
Yes, at least. It's to do with I can't think. It's to do with opticians. My brain's not working.
Okay.
But
so they're more like a professional.
They are, but then I understand that social work are using it, because I think a number of programs where as a qualified individual, you would need to demonstrate your ongoing knowledge, retention, development and retention of competencies. It's a great tool for doing that. We've tried to integrate it into academic learning, which is definitely different through our academic modules, which last across which spread across the year.
Okay,
don't know if that answered your question.
It sort of does. It's fine. I think there's one question for all of you really. Do you think that the HE sector has fully embraced technology in assessment as a result of COVID-19? So anyone can answer that one.
definitely. Well, I can only speak for our own institution, but we went from one day teaching in-house on campus to the following day not being able to go to campus. So we've had to embrace technology. We've had no choice but to embrace technology. I think what will be interesting is whether we can maintain that trajectory once on-campus learning is reinstated. I mean, as an institution, we're going back really carefully and slowly, so there will still be a lot of requirement to use the technology that we've developed an understanding of so far, but hopefully it will support us in being more innovative and thinking about what other technologies might be out there that could support teaching, learning and student assessment.
Yeah, Mike's, oh, sorry, Fiona.
No,
Mike's has been the same. I can speak for Reading, where I've just left, but of course we also had to move very quickly. We towards the use of technology with teaching, but specifically with assessment, we had put the university in a good position because we had done that programme, which meant that we were able to use some of the benefits of the MA programme to shift our what would have been face-to-face sitting in a hall exams to online exams. Yeah. And I do wonder, and I've heard this from across the sector, of some of to what extent the university sector is now going to shift to a few more online exams, because I think some of the experiences of students and staff have been positive. And so I think there is a rethink about whether we want to continue on with as many sit down in a big hall with a piece of paper and a pen for 3 hours type of exams, or whether we can actually do the kind of open book 24-hour exams that a lot of universities have done. And of course, there is this has encouraged us to rethink our assessment patterns as well, because different types of technology is available, and that opens up new opportunities. And so there is, I think, a lot of really positive rethinking going on in the sector at the moment. So people take full advantage of this moment.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think I would just
I was going to say, Lucy, sorry.
I was just going to say
Lucy.
Our programs obviously are more focused in kind of schools and a bit in FE colleges, but I think some of the things that Emma and Fiona have just said are absolutely true, that it's kind of what's happened that's good that we can take forward, because it was, a slight panic, the tech, it was creeping up in schools, and overnight it was just that's your only option really. And so I think it's kind of looking forward to September. It's what's good about assessment, what's good around the way that we deliver learning, we engage, that we can take forward, rather than just this, okay, it's back to normal, whatever that means in September. I think it's a great opportunity.
And obviously some of the research that you're already doing, you're planning to be doing with your the providers that you're already working with, will be fed into the education online generally. So do you think that the EdTech sector is up to the challenge of dealing with this pandemic that we're in right now, and having to provide the necessary tools that are required by higher education institutions to everyone?
I can say, again, from kind of a college and schools point of view, but I guess it feeds in, is absolutely, I think that they've really stepped up where they needed to. And it's now just about, it's not a lack of tools, it's more about thinking strategically and how do you use them long term. I think there's definitely enough out there and enough good quality things that can be brought in more long term.
Yeah, I think actually the products on offer, I mean, in my experience, it has been mainly around the use of Teams and the use of Blackboard, and specifically Blackboard Collaborate as well. And I think they have, well, in my experience, they've worked very well for what the sector has needed them to do. I think there has been a bit of work around engaging all academics with some of the functionality, because some academics, and this isn't, using technology is not their kind of natural habitat, and they have needed little bits of support. But actually, from what I've seen in the sector, the HE sector has been very good at coming in very quickly and supporting academics who aren't used to using these kinds of tools. And I know certainly my Twitter and my LinkedIn is flooded with examples of different types of tools and how people are using them. There's an awful lot of great sharing of good practice across the sector. So colleagues are helping each other in different institutions. It's been really positive in many ways.
Great. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for your wonderful presentations. It's really good to get the juices flowing and talking about how we're going to be using technology enhanced learning in higher education for assessment. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing some of the questions that are going to keep popping up later on our Twitter feeds and everywhere else. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you everyone for your questions and your comments. Please keep them coming. They're using the hashtag ESS20, and you can still use the email. But just before we go, just thank you really to thinking about the community of people that are in the E-Assessment Association, and why not become a member? It's very easy to sign up. It's at eassessment.com/register. Join us and join the massive community, over 1,900 people from a range of professions, institutions and organisations. And once again, thank you very much for being part of our day today. And thank you to our sponsors and supporters. The headline conference supporter was RM Results. The Week 3 conference sponsor was TCS Ion. Our conference delivery platform was Surpass, the Powering Assessment and GA Partnership, and the pre-conference insight sessions were EdTech Horizons. So our final day is tomorrow, and the webinar will be starting at 11 AM. It's on privacy and regulation. We have a range of people talking. There's John Kleeman, who is the founder and executive director of Question Mark. We also have a panel discussion with Graham Clark, the head of digital assessment services at SQA, Roger Trigg, the education manager at CCEA Regulation, Andy Lester, the senior manager for strategic policy at Ofqual, and Gareth Downey and Laura Walkerdine. They're all going to be participating with us tomorrow, so we really encourage you to finish with us tomorrow and keep coming with your questions on ESS 20.